we're back with another episode of Policy Pizza. We are going to meet Jon Guze, who's an attorney, and he's also an expert in crime and policing. He's going to talk to us about, what we can do to just make our cities safer.
We're back with another season of Policy Pizza, the show where we take you behind the scenes with the people who make public policy work. Some of the biggest things that affect all our lives are the ideas that end up in front of decision makers in business and government. So how do we get these super smart people to spend a few minutes with us? That's easy. Pizza. Each week, we'll sit down with an expert and find out about some of the most important ideas that are helping to make our world a better place.
I look at legal decisions, I look at the legal implications of statutes and proposed statutes, and I look at everything to do with crime and policing, which is currently my primary focus.
Were you a practicing attorney before you started at the research organization?
Yes, I had my own practice in Durham for 15 years before I decided I'd had enough of that, and somebody in Washington told me about John Locke Foundation, which was then a new organization. So I've been aware of what you guys do, and I've been following it and reading stuff ever since.
Very cool. And you went to law school, you said, at Duke University in North Carolina?
Yes.
What's a typical day like?
I do lots of reading and, of course, lots of writing, but it's all, for me, everything I do is somehow or other connected with law. For instance, just this morning I was working on a piece I'm writing about a recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, the laws and constitutional provisions that the court had to apply when they tried to reach a decision about the question, and also about the arguments presented by the parties, but it's all legal.
Jon, you said that you are, in addition to being an attorney and a researcher, you're also a grandfather.
Oh, that's right. I've got, hold on, I'll be in trouble if I get this wrong. I've got 7 grandkids now.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's the best thing in my life, no question.
Would you say that not having grandkids sort of makes you think a lot more about like what's going to happen in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, having grandkids, for me, it makes what happens to this country and whether we can hang on to a constitutional republic super important. I care deeply about it just because it's the world my grandkids are going to grow up in. A few years ago, there was a bill in the legislature to raise the age of juvenile jurisdiction, and I did get involved in that project, and I supported the bill, but I didn't start taking it seriously till 2020, was it, or 2019? I can't remember, to be honest, but we had a grant to look at what things were standing in the way of poor people prospering in North Carolina.
Right.
And we looked at a number of things: housing, overregulation, but the one that was assigned to me was policing, police policy and criminal justice generally. So I wrote a long report about that, and what I learned both surprised me and also upset me, because until I'd done that, I hadn't realized how huge a problem crime is. One thing I hadn't realized until doing this research was the extent of the racial disparities in victimization.
Right.
I mean, in any given year you look at, black people are about 7 or 8 times more likely to be homicide victims than white people. So, however much the rest of us, or all of us, worry about crime, black people worry about it the most because it affects them the most.
Right.
And yet you never hear about this. And the other thing that I was upset to discover was how many children are killed every year by random drive-by shootings and other kinds of criminal violence. And again, there's a huge disparity in terms of the race of the victims. There's a blogger, he's been keeping a running blog going every time he comes across one of these incidents. When a child under 10 is killed by random violence, he posts something on his blog, and a photograph and some details, and if there's a GoFundMe site, he posts that information and so on. So that's in and of itself is extremely upsetting, just looking at all these innocent faces.
Yeah, once it's all compiled. And
when you see one face after another of an innocent child that was killed. But the other thing that's shocking about it is almost every face is black.
Yeah.
So I think this ought to be the civil rights issue of our day.
what's the relationship there with crime and policing?
Well, it's a complicated relationship. It's something I really only learned about a couple years ago when I did a big report. But the bottom line is very simple, and it's common sense, really, if you think about it. More police, less crime. Police presence has been well documented to deter crime. When I wrote my report, I cited more than a dozen studies that showed this, and there's been lots more since then. So I think in terms of, as social science goes, this is about as well corroborated as you can get.
Right. In terms of like all this is backed up by lots of research and...
Yeah, and lots of research by different people using different methods, different cities, different approaches, but it all comes up to the same thing: more police, less crime.
Yeah. So I mean, is that happening now? Are people acting on that
Well,
those policies?
no,
Or?
quite the contrary. As I'm sure you know, after George Floyd was killed in 2020, there were a lot of calls to defund the police. That didn't happen too much. It did happen in one or two places, including Minneapolis, as it happened.
Yeah.
But police funding was not at the top. More police funding wasn't on anybody's playlist at the time.
Yeah.
And it still isn't, although that's beginning to change. But the bigger problem, and the reason why we have less police presence than ever, is because there was a lot of anti-police hysteria at the time, a lot of violent protests complaining about the police, and there's very good reason to know that when that happens, the police pull back, police take early retirement, they're less proactive, it's much higher to attract new hires.
Yeah.
So as a result, almost every police force in the country is understaffed now compared to where they were before 2020, and certainly woefully understaffed compared to where they ought to be if we really want to bring these crime rates down.
Right. So how actually would you increase the levels of police? I mean, is it a decision that cities make, or?
It varies. Police is mostly a local activity.
Okay.
And it's going to take more money. The bottom line is it's going to take a lot more money. Even before all this happened, you can't attract more and better candidates for officer training without raising police salaries. But now, because of the fact that policing has become so undesirable as an occupation, it's going to take a lot more money.
Okay.
That's unfortunate, and it's not something politicians like to contemplate.
Yeah.
But it's what needs to happen, and I argue in that paper, and I've argued many times since, it's money well spent, because some of the studies that have looked at this find not just the police, increasing the number of police officers on the street reduces the rate of crime, including especially homicides,
Right.
but it does so in a cost-effective way.
Right.
Because crime is expensive. It's expensive because it uses police time. It's expensive because it involves the courts.
Right.
And the whole criminal prosecution industry. But it's also cost expensive because it harms the communities in which it occurs. When there's a lot of crime, it reduces economic development.
Right.
Businesses are discouraged. Businesses leave.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs don't want to invest money in those neighborhoods. As a result, unemployment goes up. Everybody's harmed. Tax receipts go down.
Right.
So if you take everything into consideration, in fact, even if you only look at the costs in terms of the cost of dealing with criminals after they commit crimes and the cost to the victims,
Right.
it's very cost effective. Well, it's important to emphasize that crime doesn't just hurt victims. It hurts whole communities for all the reasons we just said. But there's other reasons, there's other ways in which it hurts a community. Because when crime levels are high, people are afraid to use the public spaces. They're afraid to go out on the street. They're afraid
Right.
to use the parks. These places get taken over by drug dealers, pimps, and other kinds of criminals.
Yes.
And it just becomes dangerous.
What's one or two of the biggest things standing in the way of making this happen?
Well, the biggest thing is that people don't take this problem seriously enough. Ordinary crimes don't get enough coverage. People are very concerned, both on the left and the right, about police misconduct. It's been the issue du jour ever since 2020 when George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
But you know, the number, I'm not trying to minimize it, but the number of unarmed black men who die in police custody is tiny. It's maybe 10 or 12 a year. Every unnecessary death is unfortunate, but that just pales into insignificance when you look at the tens of thousands of people who die of homicide every year.
Right.
And that number has increased dramatically since George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
All that anti-police hysteria resulted in police leaving the profession, failing to be proactive, or just deciding that it's not worth going into some neighborhoods and looking for trouble because you might get, your whole career might be ruined as a result.
All right, John, this is a slice of margarita pizza.
Thanks, Greg. You know, I can't attest to the accuracy, but I had a client once who was a Neapolitan pizza maker. Yeah. Who started a restaurant here, and he told me that this is the original pizza.
Okay.
When Italy was newly unified, they had a king and a queen. Queen Margherita paid a state visit to Naples, and in her honor, somebody invented this pizza for her.
Okay.
And that's why we call them margaritas.
So John, like, if anybody's watching and they really want, this strikes them as something, you know, like important, right? Like, what can they do at this point?
Well, I'd say the first thing that needs to be done is we just need to raise awareness. That's what I've been trying to do. Pieces I write, things I
talk about it.
Bring these instances to people's attention so they know what's really going on. Bring the racial disparities to people's attention. Beyond that, though, you know, squeaking wheel gets the oil. Yeah. You need to let your city or county council people know that you're concerned about crime, and you want something done about it, and you're willing to pay for it. Let the members of the General Assembly know too.
All right. Well, thanks, John. And
thank you, Greg.
And we'll tell everybody in the notes below all those resources that you mentioned.
Thank you.